Hey guys, Brad here. Before we start the show, I want to encourage you all to subscribe to the Millennial Mastermind podcast on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcasting app. It's a great way to make sure that you never miss one of our most recent interviews. And while you're there, please leave a rating or review. It really helps others to find the show. Thanks. In Napoleon Hill's timeless classic, Think and Grow Rich, he defines a mastermind group as the coordination of knowledge and effort between two or more people for the attainment of a definite purpose. In this podcast, that coordination is created between you, me, and our amazing guests. Our definite purpose is achieving extraordinary results in your business and your life. I'm your host, Brad Mulvey. Welcome to the Millennial Mastermind Podcast. Hello, Millennial Mafia. Welcome to the Millennial Mastermind Podcast, where it is my job to interview guests who will provide you with the tools, tactics, and inspiration to take your business and your life to the next level. Today, I'm joined by a guest whose manifesto is to help leaders build a better self each day. I use that term manifesto very intentionally because our guest is the organizer of the Manifesto Adventure Retreat, which is a life-changing adventure experience for men. These retreats challenge men mentally, physically, and emotionally to make good men great. Who is this mystery guest? Today, I'm chatting with leadership coach, speaker, facilitator, and the founder of Mindful Choice, Christie Garcia. If you're a man, listen up because we're about to be gifted the tools, tips, and confidence to help maximize our careers and businesses, create life balance, and be a better man, dad, husband, friend, boss, peer, or any of those roles that you may identify with. If you're a woman, also listen up because we're going to dive into many leadership principles that can span across any gender lines. So with that, Christie Garcia, welcome to the show.
Wow, what an introduction. Thank you, Brad.
Yeah, and well earned. And I'm really excited to dive into some of those bullet points there because I think there's so much that we as the Millennial Mafia can take from some of what you've been doing these past several years. So just to kick things off, would you mind sharing just a little bit about how you got into leadership coaching and specifically within this realm of masculinity, kind of how your journey led to where you are today?
Yeah, that's a great question. As most of you probably are experiencing, our careers take us in many different directions, and mine is definitely no different. So I started out in medical sales and had a great career through my 20s. Decided I wanted to always run my own business. My father was an entrepreneur, and so it was always in the back of my head. I just didn't know which direction. And about 7-8 years ago, I guess now, my old boss really kind of talked to me about leadership development and life coaching and all these things. And so I got interested in the industry, started taking courses. Eventually, I seen how it could actually really transform business. So what I did was I built out a program called Mindful Choice. That's my main leadership coaching business that is based within organizations and companies. And what I found is that about 95% of my population ended up being men over the last 5 years. And so what I was helping them with is really how to create a more effective impact, how to improve your relationships, how to maximize your career, how to step into your leadership, really communicate more effectively. And the audience that I kept finding me tended to be these fast-growing startup cultures. Millennials up to, I would say, mid-40s are really the people that are in these up and coming leadership roles. And recently, I would say in the last 2 years, I decided that I think this male audience is really missing out on some of the tools that a lot of women are getting around leadership development, meditation, personal development. There's just not as much out there for guys. And the more research I find, there's actually quite a bit out there, but it's really hard to find it. And so when I'm working with these guys, they don't know the tools, they don't know what's available. And as men, you don't necessarily go out and seek it out. And so what I've really started to notice is that there was this need in this population to help them really step into their masculinity, get back their voice, really find the power in who they are as a man. I've started seeing over and over and over again this kind of just going through the motions of life. Like, I'm fine. Life is good. I have a good career. My family's okay. Like, nothing's wrong. Everything's good. But there was no real excitement. Like, life is awesome. I'm really happy. I can't wait till the next thing. It was just very mediocre. And I heard that time and time and time again. And so this last year, I realized there is an opportunity to really offer more to the male population and start this movement to get them into more of this good man, great stuff. Like, you don't have to just be good. You don't have to just be fine. You really can be great, and your relationships can be awesome, and your career can be fantastic, and you can have it all. I feel like a lot of guys compartmentalize their worlds to where their work is really awesome or their family is really awesome, and maybe they'll go back and forth, but it's never like all at the same time. It's really hard to juggle and balance it all. So yeah, creative programs to help create some of that balance and make sure that everybody gets to wake up at the end of their days saying, damn, that was an awesome life, not just an awesome career or an awesome family, but you have the whole package and you didn't have to give one up for the other.
I love that. And I think, speaking to the millennial generation in particular, that is something that I've noticed. We tend to look at things more as life in general and not as compartmentalized as looking at your career versus your family and those things. It's definitely a struggle. And I think that I can totally see where someone like yourself would come in and help, especially men, figure that out. So you mentioned men kind of finding themselves and some of the struggle with identifying with their masculinity and things of that nature. I think that masculinity has maybe changed over the past several years or several decades, even for today's generation versus, that of my dad and my grandpa and going further back. How have you noticed that change in masculinity, and like, how should men be thinking about masculinity?
Absolutely. It's such a good question. And I think the answer is not always clear. Still, we're figuring that out. There is a lot of confusion on what is masculinity today. There's so much going on in our culture around masculinity, and somewhere down the line, we've made it a bad thing. You're chauvinistic, or you're sexist, or you're this or you're that. So there's a lot of negative connotations when you hear the word masculine anymore. And I really think that's unfortunate, because where I think masculine energy is, one of the tools I use is really helping people step into their best self. So whether it's a female or a man, we tend to have more of a masculine energy or a feminine energy. And men and women have both. And so I look at it as more masculine energy it's the groundedness, it's the safety, it's the structure, it's the results driven, it's the success minded, it's being able to see clear during pressure and being able to weed through the drama and find clarity in chaos. So I think of masculine energy as what the benefits of what it used to be without the I think where the negative side comes from is the unawareness, the ego part of masculine energy, where, it can come across as arrogant, or you're a jerk, or you have no self-awareness, or there's no empathy, right? We all have a good and bad side to every aspect of our character. And I think masculine and feminine energy is the same way. So, feminine energy is not always great either. Like, you can be kind and caring and empathetic, but there's a point where you're too kind and caring and empathetic if you don't have boundaries and restrictions. So, I look at the two go hand in hand. In order to be a well-rounded masculine man, you have to learn how to empathize, and you have to learn how to care for others, which I think is where our generations are shifting. There is a little more of this empathy and this caring quality that's coming in with men. And I think we're getting quoted as being, softer than we used to be. Which could be, again, a good and a bad thing. So I think it's finding that balance of what is masculinity today, and how do you really get to own it as a man? especially as women start owning more of their masculine energy and being more independent and strong-minded and leadership driven, there is a divide in what that energy used to be in our culture, where men were the ones that worked and were the leaders of organizations, and women kind of were this subservient type that stayed back and kind of did not what they were told always, but they weren't the spotlight. And so now that we've got two rising sexes that are making their way in the world, like, how do we work together to really make that energy just balanced? And it doesn't have to be either, the male energy is bad and the female energy is awesome, or vice versa. It could be, we are all awesome and we all have to have a balance of this masculine and feminine energy in order to be really successful in our careers and our life and our families.
So how do we get better at that? So I guess it probably depends on the actual person and whether, they're that very old school masculine guy who comes off as a total asshole and does have that ego aspect that you mentioned that's just overbearing, or whether you're coming from the perspective of, in the word you used, this really soft guy who doesn't show a lot of those really old school masculine traits. So how do we balance it, and how do you know if you're walking the right path?
That is such a good question. That's actually what I love about the work I get to do. I have a tool that it's called the Leadership Circle, and there's several coaches that are using it out there. But what I love about this tool is it really shows you what your current impact is. Do you tend to show up more on the, on the softer people side of the skills, which is the feminine energy, or do you tend to show up on the masculine side? And really, when we think about our ego, it's usually ran by insecurities and fears. And so a masculine ego tends to come across as a jerk, as arrogant, as an asshole, as someone that's, mean. But I'm a big believer, no one's intentionally mean. There's some, I think there's bad people in the world, but I think 99% of the population doesn't intend to be mean. It's usually driven by a reactive tendency, by an insecurity or a fear somewhere down the line, and they're overusing a strength. Again, that masculine strength, that the weakness side of it goes into maybe doesn't listen to people's feelings, is just results oriented, gets stuck on their way, not others. And there's a belief system that lies underneath that ego, where the strength side of it, when they learn to self-manage the ego, then they just get to be in that grounded place. The success driver, brings a lot of passion and excitement to things. They bring structure, they bring outcomes, that results driven energy. So, for me, it's teaching people about their ego to help them understand it. And really the balance is to pull from all of them. There's three reactive energies, and there's the complier, the controller, and the protector. And if we are using just one as our main ego, which we tend to do, it usually pushes us away from the other quality. And so what we have to do is learn as a controller to pull from the complier. So you have that balance of both, intense egomaniac masculine energy to the complier energy, which tends to know how to relate to people and how to soften up the blows and be more empathetic to bring the people along. Otherwise, the controller will always end up at the finish line by themselves. They'll be successful, but they'll be by themselves. And vice versa, the complier person on that far end of the spectrum, where it's more of that feminine people energy, if they don't pull from the controller, then they tend to be the guy that never gets the results. They'll be likable and they'll be, have that warm energy, but they tend to always miss deadlines. They tend to always kind of get stuck in the drama and the chaos because they don't want to make the hard deadline or make the hard decision, and get a little on the fence because they don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. So, as you can see, neither of those are really strong personalities if you're using the weakness side of it. When you use them both as their strength, now you have a warm, caring, thoughtful leader who knows how to motivate people to get to the end result. So my goal is to get everybody to learn how to use all three, which creates the well-balanced person and leader of any organization or of your home or of your life.
I love it. So I would love to dive into that even a little bit further and use maybe a specific example of somebody who is more on that complier side of the scale. And I assume that these three reactive energies can really apply to either men or women.
Absolutely.
So if somebody does find that they fall into more of that complier bucket, and to be totally transparent, I think sometimes I do. I feel like I switch back and forth depending on the day. I don't know what that says about me, but what can they do to pull more from that controller energy, to make sure that they're balancing out a little bit better so that they can get those results that they want?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And, when you say you kind of bounce in and out, that's exactly how all of us do. 90% of the time, we use our reactive nature as a full strength. It helps us excel. It helps us get to where we want to go. It makes us good people in the world. It's when stress, pressure, something changes in our world that creates a new dynamic is when we go into that reactive tendency. So when you feel overwhelmed, that's most likely when you go more into that complier. You shut down, you may go passive, or you may just, go along to get along. And so where, really what it comes down to is self-awareness and ownership. I always say those are the absolute two most important things to be able to change your impact tomorrow. If you can be aware of when you shut down and be aware of when you check out of your best self, now you have a choice to change that behavior. Most of us go into that reactive tendency and it becomes a roller coaster ride, that problem solve. I always tell people, how often do you feel like you're just going through the motions? It's problem solve, problem solve, problem solve. Sometimes things are good, but eventually it goes down again. That's when you're in that reactive mindset and you're not truly conscious about what you can control right here, right now. You let the outside world control it. It goes back to, if you don't control your brain, someone or something else will. That's like the biggest motto of the company right now that I have going is control your brain. If you can control it, then you can stop when you overuse that strength. So as a complier, if that's where you tend to go, being able to say, okay, why am I wanting to just go along right now? What's the consequences of me not taking action? Maybe it's fear. Maybe it's you're going to hurt someone's feelings. We all have a motivator. Compliers tend to want to be liked. And so they don't want to cross any people along the way of their journey. And so they will put their own goals, their own visions on hold in order to make everybody else happy. The unfortunate thing there is what happens is they get lost in the ride of others and they never really take action on their own life. And so they wake up one day and they're like, what the heck just happened? I don't know who I am and I don't know what I want. And so, making sure you actually ask yourself, am I doing what's right? Am I doing what I believe? Am I speaking up and speaking my truth? One of the biggest indicators for any of us, whether you're a complier, controller, or protector, our visceral body tells us when we're not our best self. Sometimes you'll feel it in your throat or your stomach. Usually it's like an agitation or a frustration or an upset feeling. That's usually when you're going into ego. And some egos are very loud, and those are kind of those asshole, arrogant guys or gals out there that get louder when they're upset. Or there's the very passive, quiet guy and gal that they just shut down, which is sometimes just as bad. Not knowing what someone's thinking is sometimes worse than knowing where they stand, right? And so knowing which is your tendency. Do you tend to shut down and shut people out? Or do you tend to get louder and vocalize? And just being able to be self-aware of how you show up when you're under pressure allows you to change those behaviors. And that's really where I believe people can maximize their leadership, is in those moments of pressure. We can all be great when life is good. It's those moments of pressure and stress that we tend to go into our worst self because we're unconscious now. So being conscious in those moments, that would be my biggest advice, is asking yourself in those moments, why am I reacting? Why does it matter? And what is the action I really want to take? I'm not just taking because for the sake of someone else.
Yeah, and I have a feeling that with that self-awareness, a great way to maybe practice that would be that meditation that you mentioned earlier. Just being able to really understand yourself a little bit better and practice that mindfulness, so you can be aware of how you're reacting in that moment and trace those roots. Would that be accurate?
Absolutely. Meditation is a great way to become aware. And I'm even a big believer, meditation is great, but usually that's something you step out and you kind of have your moment. So that's one aspect of it. I think it's more important in those moments, like when you're wanting to react, actually taking a breath and saying, why does this matter? It is so often we'll just react and then we'll stop and we'll have to go clean up a mess, or we'll have to fix the drama, or something, happen. And I hear more often than not, well, that wasn't my intention. I didn't mean for them to feel that way. I didn't mean for that to happen. No one means for things to happen when we're in that reactive, mindset. So it's really being able to stop in those moments before you do any action to say, what do I really want to do here? What does my best self say I should do? And why? How does that affect me? How does it affect others? And really pulling yourself out of it. So often we get so stuck in the details of a task or of a story or of a situation with someone that we get into the drama of it and we forget that bigger picture. So we start curing a symptom versus like the bigger issue. And that's where that proactive mindset, that conscious mindset gets you more into a state of being that you're proactively creating life. You're proactively creating a business. You're proactively ahead of the game versus reacting and you're behind the game.
I love it. And so you mentioned that two of the key aspects are one, that self-awareness, and then you also mentioned ownership. Would you mind touching on why ownership is important and what listeners should be thinking about when they're considering ownership?
Yes, that's my favorite word. Ownership is the biggest thing ever. And it's a funny word because everybody thinks they own their stuff, right? I hear all the time, well, I'm really self-aware, but so-and-so's not. I'm really self-aware, but someone else could really use this work. And I laugh every time I hear that because at the end of the day, we're all self-aware until we're not. So ownership to me is really owning your good, your bad, and your ugly. We can all be good, bad, and ugly.
And we all are, for sure.
Absolutely. And it's usually the ones that say, I'm good, that is not aware of their ugly. They own their greatness and they own their good side, but they forget to own the bad side of it. Or vice versa. There's people that tend to own all their bad and they have very low confidence, so they never own their good. And so my thing is really helping people take full ownership. Our ego only shows up when we're not confident, when we're trying to prove ourselves, when we're chasing that white ghost to say, you know what, world, I'm good enough. And so being able to own all of it is really, really powerful. So my favorite activity is to tell people, write your 20 greatest things about you and own the crap out of that. Remember that those great 20 things also have a weakness side to it. You can overuse a productivity skill. You can overuse a good communicating skill. When does it cross over to your weakness? That's the part you have to own too. And being able to do both, now you can actually show up in circumstances and say, hey, I do it all the time with my clients or with my family members and friends where it's like, I know I can be a jerk, especially under pressure. Like I'm an intense, non-emotional, hyper-rational person when I go into my stress ego. And so when I'm there, I kind of have to warn people like, hey, by the way, I'm not going to be my bubbly, happy self today. So if I get too intense, just like stop me and I'll come back. But that's, being able to own that part of you, no one can take you out anymore. And a lot of times what happens is when someone calls you out on a weakness, we tend to get defensive. We go into denial. We want to blame someone else. And that really is such a disadvantage to our leadership qualities. The more you can own the weak side of your personality, one, the easier it is to fix it. And two, the more respect and trust and impact you have with the people you're trying to lead. They trust you so much more when you say, hey, yeah, I was wrong and I'm sorry for that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And that I was wanted to go down that route too, of what specifically ownership looks like within leadership. and how that ownership impacts either your organization or your team or your family. What positive impacts that can then come out of you taking ownership of maybe a negative situation or your own weaknesses or whatever it may be.
That's such a great question. And actually, that's a lot that's built into the manifesto is the ownership part of it. What is your part? I'm a big believer that every single one of us plays a part in every situation that is happening in the world. Whether it's 1% ownership or involvement or 99%, doesn't matter what's happening in the world. We all play a role in it, whether it's how we voted, whether it's how, we show up at our gas station or how we play a role with the neighbors, we all play a role in how our society is playing out right now. And so what's our role? So at work, if you're thinking about my boss is a jerk and he doesn't understand me, well, what's your role in that? How many boundaries have you put up? Why doesn't he understand you? Are you not communicating effectively enough? Are you not asking for what you need? Are you not showing up and offering your full value? Some of these things are true and some of them aren't. And so figuring out what is your part of that story and how do you change that? How do you get to have a voice when something's not going your way or you're feeling someone is putting you in that victim spot?
So one other thing that you talk about is being 1% better every day. What does that mean and how can we do that? How can we become 1% better each and every day?
Yes, I hear all the time that people don't have time, right? Time is a very precious thing in today's world. And I'm a big believer this work doesn't have to take a lot of time. It takes thoughtfulness and it takes choice. So I always tell people, take baby steps. You don't have to be the best dad tomorrow or the best boss tomorrow or start your business tomorrow. But if you want to be 1% better at any aspect of your life, whether it's to be a better employee, a better friend, a better husband, a better wife, a better father or parent, or just a better person in the world, what is one thing you can do every day to achieve that? At the end of the year, you're 365% better than you were today. And so it's just one simple thing.
Yeah, I love it because I think that when we think about personal development or growth, or especially when we're looking at other people and what other people have been able to achieve in their lives, it sometimes can look so monumental and looks like so far away. But it just takes, small changes on a daily basis, just like you were saying. So I love how you kind of share that and that approach to becoming your best self of just making those small improvements each and every day.
Absolutely.
One question that I love to ask guests when they come on the show is, through all you've learned, whether it's through your medical device sales days, now that you've been in this leadership coaching role for some time, what advice would you go back and give to yourself when you were in your mid-20s, say 25 years old? Is there something that you've learned that you've really taken out of your experience that you wish you could go tell your younger self?
Oh, that's a good question. I think the biggest thing that I continue have to tell myself every day is, don't get comfortable. I think there's something about being comfortable that's great and safe and secure, and we all thrive for that. Especially the older you get, the more you just want this air quotes normal life. But there's something about getting comfortable. And actually, I just had to remind myself that this last year, I got too comfortable and life got I thought I was good and I thought I was happy, but there's a point where when we get too comfortable, we forget to be intentional. We forget to create the next thing. And so I think it's create the path, make sure you're intentional when life lessons happen, because they will happen and they happen over and over again. If you're not learning the lesson, then ask yourself, why am I getting the same lesson over and over and over again? Learn from it, grow from it, move on from it. Yeah, I wish someone would have told me, when someone comes in your life, you say goodbye when they're supposed to go. Like, don't hold on to the things that are supposed to leave you, whether it's a career, whether it's a person, whether it's a car. There's a point where you have to kind of say goodbye to certain phases of life and allow the next best thing to come into it. And the only way to move on and get the next best thing is to let go of the old thing.
I love that. And I couldn't agree more. And I think that just thinking through how important it is to really reflect on when life slaps you in the face and teaches you a lesson, actually taking that to heart and taking time to reflect on what you learned from that. Because, I'll throw myself under the bus as perpetrator number one, who takes learning those lessons sometimes over and over and over again, when really you just need to learn it once and make those changes. But sometimes we don't have that foresight, but I love that that's where you took that. So Christie, people I'm sure are going to be loving this conversation. They're going to want to learn more about you and everything that you're doing, and hear more about Manifesto and things like that. Where can we point people to check out more information about yourself?
That's awesome. Thank you so much. I've actually, I created a landing page for you guys for this amazing millennial mafia that you got going on. I've got a free gift there. They could check out mindfulchoicecoaching.com/millennial. So mindfulchoicecoaching.com/millennial. And there's a free gift of how to improve your impact today. And I highly recommend checking it out. And that'll lead you to my main website if you're interested in more programs as well.
That's awesome. Well, Christie, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. I had a ton of fun checking out what you're up to and learning more about masculinity, leadership, and how we can all get 1% better every day. So thank you so much for the time.
Thank you, Brad, for having me. This was wonderful. And I just love what you're up to. So keep up the good work. We need more people like you in the world.
Thank you.